As we have reported, Robert Mueller has secured a fourth guilty plea in his wide-ranging investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Again, in keeping with the custom of a tight lid on this case, today's development is one that no one saw coming before today. Earlier today, getting to the news of it, Dutch lawyer Alex van der Zwaan pleaded guilty to lying to investigators about his communications with former Trump campaign aide Rick Gates and an individual named as Person A in court filings. We should note van der Zwaan is the son-in-law of a Putin-linked Russian oligarch named in the controversial Trump dossier. At this hour, it is not clear if van der Zwaan has signed a cooperation deal with Mueller. NBC News is reporting his attorney said in court today, quote, there is some possibility he would not face a long sentence, but because he doesn't have a criminal record, he might only get a few months even without a deal. Today's news came after a Los Angeles Times report that said Rick Gates will plead guilty to fraud-related charges within days and made clear to prosecutors he would testify, in fact, against Paul Manafort. Gates and Manafort both pleaded not guilty back in October to a number of charges, including money laundering. Trump attorney Ty Cobb declined to comment on today's charges against this lawyer, van der Zwaan, saying the case, like the Manafort and Gates indictments, is not related in any way to the White House. Well, with us for more tonight, Julia Ainsley is here in New York, NBC News national security and justice reporter. And former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance is back with us. She spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor. Okay, Julia, you get to take the big swing at the first question here, and that is significance of what happened today, this guy, and why we're about to hear the name Skadden Arps a lot more.
Those are great questions. So, significance of today, I think for most reporters in Washington, we said, this is another name that we haven't heard before. We must just be looking at the tip of the iceberg.
So it wasn't in one of your baseball cards.
I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you that it was, Brian, but it really wasn't. But it seems now we're following a tangent from a tangent. We know that this person, Alexander van der Zwaan, communicated with Rick Gates, who is the deputy of Paul Manafort, who worked on the Trump campaign. You have to follow each little breadcrumb to get closer to the White House here. So it seems like such a tangent to us from the outside. But really, once you look at a lot of the communication, what is in this document that was filed today, the context starts to come to light. And part of it is that and what they laid out in court today is that Skadden Arps, that law firm that you named, is where Alexander van der Zwaan was working. He was based in London, and he leaked talking points about a report he was working on with Rick Gates that was to come up with a justification for the imprisonment of the Ukrainian prime minister's opponent.
Ukraine tied to Paul Manafort. How?
Because, of course, Paul Manafort was working on behalf of the political parties there, the pro-Russian interest in Ukraine. This is a lot to handle. The point is, Skadden Arps was not supposed to have talking points. They're supposed to be an independent body. Those were leaked to Rick Gates, and it seems that Alexander van der Zwaan lied about that communication with Rick Gates. What's interesting here, for reading between the lines, is we think, how do they know he lied? What testimony is conflicting? And it seems from reporting that it could be that Rick Gates is now telling the truth, and this man, Alexander van der Zwaan, what his testimony was, is now seen as false.
Wow. And Joyce, I didn't even mention that it appears this young man, our Dutch lawyer, speaks Russian and recorded some of his phone calls. Just interesting plot points along the way. Joyce, to the ears of a former Fed, what does this tell you about the Mueller investigation?
Mueller looks to be charging straight into the core of this investigation and determining whether there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians as regards the election. And so the breadcrumbs that Julie is referring to are these little pieces that let Mueller test the evidence and ultimately determine whether there was, in fact, criminal conduct that involved not just Russians, as we saw in last Friday's indictment, but folks in the United States as well.
Julia, we've asked you this before, and you've confirmed, and today I'm guessing drives home the tip of the iceberg theory. Actually, icebergs have more showing above the surface than this Mueller case seems to.
That's probably true, Brian, and I think that we're seeing the scope as well, that it's not just going to be the president, the campaign, and Russian oligarchs. We're going to see everyone tied into this web. And a big thing that is coming to light is the way lobbying has been influenced by foreign governments inside the United States for a long time. And Paul Manafort was the face of that. And we're starting to see the fact that Michael Flynn as well.
Yeah.
When people don't disclose, when they don't disclose these FARA filings that people had ignored for years, if you pull on those threads, you start to see all of these influences underneath that are driving a lot of the politics, that drove a lot of what happens with people who worked on the Trump campaign. So not only, I think, is Robert Mueller getting at a lot that we're going to learn about this White House, we're going to learn more about the way Washington works just from this investigation.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.